The marble of the lobby floor was a cold, unforgiving sea of polished white and gray, reflecting the gold leaf of the Corinthian columns that stretched towards a vaulted ceiling painted with celestial frescoes. It was a space designed to intimidate, to announce in a hushed, architectural roar that this was the domain of wealth, power, and influence. Into this cathedral of commerce walked a man who, to the casual observer, seemed utterly out of place. He wore a simple, gray hoodie, the fabric softened and slightly frayed from years of comfortable wear, not neglect. His jeans were unremarkable, and his sneakers were designed for walking, not for making a statement. His name was Elias Vance, and he was the founder and CEO of Vanguard Innovations, a technology empire that was quietly reshaping the future of global logistics and artificial intelligence. But in this moment, he was just a man. A black man in a hoodie, carrying the weight of a long flight and the contemplative stillness of a 2-hour walk through the city to clear his head. In exactly 5 minutes, his quiet presence would detonate a $5 billion corporate partnership. In 7 minutes, it would end a career. In an hour, it would become a global headline. But for now, there was only the soft scuff of his sneakers on the marble and the silent judgment of the world he was about to enter. He approached the front desk, a long, imposing monolith of dark mahogany. Behind it stood a woman whose posture was as rigid as the hotel's architecture. She was a gatekeeper, and she knew it. The man didn't see a name tag, but he saw the crispness of her uniform, the perfect coif of her hair, and the faint, almost imperceptible curl of her lip as he came to a stop before her. He waited patiently for her to acknowledge him. He was a man who understood the power of silence, the weight of stillness. He had built his company not on loud proclamations but on quiet, relentless execution. He could wait. The woman, Clara, finished typing something on her keyboard with a series of sharp, deliberate clicks. She did not look up. She was performing a well-practiced act of dismissal, a subtle power play to establish the hierarchy of the encounter before a single word was spoken. He was the supplicant, she was the authority. This was the culture of the place, a silent language spoken in delayed glances and pointed inattention. And Elias Vance was fluent in it. He had seen it his entire life, in boardrooms, in restaurants, in showrooms. It was the friction of the world, and he had learned long ago not to be worn down by it, but to use it as a whetstone to sharpen his own resolve. Finally, she looked up, her eyes scanning him from his worn sneakers to his tired face, and the judgment was no longer silent. It was a cold, clinical assessment that found him wanting. The air grew thick with unspoken assumptions, each one a tiny, invisible crack forming in the foundation of a monumental business deal. The woman's voice, when it finally came, was as cool and polished as the marble beneath his feet. "Can I help you?" she asked, but the question was not an invitation. It was a challenge, a demand for him to justify his presence in her immaculate world. Elias offered a small, weary smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes," he said, his voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the sharp, brittle energy radiating from her. "I have a reservation." He didn't offer a name. He was observing. He was testing. The culture of a company, he had always believed, wasn't found in the mission statement hanging in the corporate office. It was found at the front lines. It was in the unscripted moments, in the way the lowest-level employee treated a person they believed to have no power. This single interaction was a biopsy of the soul of Stellaron Corp., the conglomerate he was hours away from merging with, the parent company of this very hotel. Clara's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. "A reservation," she repeated, the words coated in a thin veneer of polite disbelief. She leaned forward, her tone shifting to one of strained, patronizing patience, the kind one might use with a lost child or a confused elderly person. "Under what name, sir?" The "sir" was an insult, a weaponized courtesy designed to highlight his perceived lack of status. Elias's gaze remained fixed on her. He could feel the eyes of others in the grand lobby, the subtle shift of attention. A young woman sitting on a plush velvet couch, nursing a laptop and a cup of coffee, glanced up, her brow furrowed with curiosity. She was the silent witness, the unseen audience to this small, quiet drama. Vance, Elias said simply. Clara's fingers tapped on the keyboard, a percussive, dismissive rhythm. Vance, she spelled out loud, as if he might not know how. I'm not seeing anything under that name. Are you sure you're at the right hotel? The Corinthian Grand is quite exclusive, the implication was clear, people like you don't stay here. People like you get lost. Elias felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. It was not anger. It was a profound, aching disappointment. This was the culture Stellaron's CEO had personally assured him was built on synergy, respect, and forward-thinking inclusion. He saw no synergy here. He felt no respect. And this was the furthest thing from forward-thinking. He decided to press the test further. Perhaps my assistant made the booking, he said, his voice still infuriatingly calm. She can be forgetful. In that case, I'll just take your best available suite. The presidential, if it's free. Clara's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. A small, incredulous scoff escaped her lips before she could catch it. The mask of professionalism slipped, revealing the raw prejudice beneath. It was the moment the test turned from a passive observation into an active experiment. The stakes were no longer just about a hotel room, they were about the very fabric of a $5 billion future. The presidential suite. The words hung in the air between them, an absurdity in Clara's mind. She looked at his simple hoodie, which probably cost more than her monthly salary, but she didn't see the fine cashmere blend or the designer label discreetly stitched inside. She saw only a garment that, in her world, signified a lack of ambition, a lack of worth. She saw his sneakers, built for comfort and purpose, and interpreted them as a sign of poverty. She looked at his skin, and her mind, a product of a lifetime of ingrained biases, filled in the rest of the story. A story of someone who did not belong. Her voice dripped with a condescending sweetness that was far more insulting than open hostility. Sir, the presidential suite is our premier accommodation. It's reserved for our most distinguished guests. Perhaps a standard king room would be more suitable for your budget. She said the word budget as if it were a communicable disease. Elias Vance's face remained a mask of placid observation, but behind his eyes, a decision was crystallizing. The deal was not just about merging two companies, it was about merging two cultures. And the culture on display was toxic. It was a rot that started here, at the front desk, and undoubtedly worked its way up to the executive suites. A company that allowed this kind of casual dehumanization at its public face was not a company he could trust with the future of his life's work. The silent witness on the couch, Maya, a young tech entrepreneur who had come to the lobby just to feel the energy of success, now watched with rapt attention. She had seen Elias Vance's face before, on the cover of a business magazine. She wasn't certain it was him, but the possibility sent a jolt through her. She watched Clara's sneering performance with a growing sense of horror. The injustice of it was a physical thing, a tightening in her chest. Quietly, discreetly, she angled her phone on the table beside her, aimed it toward the desk, and pressed record. She didn't know what she was capturing, but she knew it felt important. Elias reached into the back pocket of his jeans. The price is not a concern, he said, his voice still low, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the lobby's ambient noise. I'll be paying for the week in advance. He pulled out a wallet, simple and unadorned, and from it, he produced a card. It was matte black, heavy, and stark. Made of anodized titanium, it made a soft, metallic sound as he placed it on the mahogany counter. It was the American Express Centurion card. The black card, an object of legend in the world of finance, a symbol of almost limitless spending power, available by invitation only to the world's ultra-elite. It was a key that could unlock almost any door. Except, it seemed, this one. The sight of the card should have ended the interaction immediately. It should have triggered a cascade of apologies, a frantic scramble to please. It was a universally recognized signal of immense status, a piece of metal that screamed what Elias Vance's humble clothing did not. But Clara's prejudice was a fortress, impenetrable to reason, blind to evidence that contradicted her deeply held assumptions. She looked at the card, then back at the black man in the hoodie who had presented it. And in that moment, her mind chose the only explanation that fit her worldview: it had to be fake. It had to be stolen. The alternative, that this man was exactly who the card proclaimed him to be, was simply too much for her biased reality to process. And so, she laughed. It was not a giggle. It was a short, sharp bark of derision. A sound of utter contempt that echoed in the cavernous, silent lobby. "A centurion card," she said, her voice laced with mockery. "That's a good one. Sir, I don't know what kind of scam you're trying to pull, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call security." The words, the laughter, the accusation, they hung in the air like a physical blow. The silent witness, Maya, gasped audibly, her phone still recording, her heart pounding. She had just captured the moment of impact, the point of no return. The insult was so profound, so nakedly based on prejudice, that the very marble beneath them seemed to absorb the shame of it. Elias Vance did not flinch. He did not raise his voice. He did not snatch the card back in anger. His stillness became absolute. It was the calm at the center of a hurricane, a terrifying quiet that precedes a cataclysm. The world seemed to slow down. He looked at Clara, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes beyond weariness. It was not anger. It was something far colder, far more final. It was the look of a judge about to pass sentence. He let the silence stretch, letting her words and her laughter reverberate in the space she had created. He wanted her to hear it. He wanted her to feel the weight of it. Every tick of the grand clock in the lobby was a nail being hammered into the coffin of her career, into the tomb of the $5 billion deal. Behind his calm facade, his mind was working with the lightning speed that had made him a titan of industry. He was calculating the fallout. The broken trust. The cultural misalignment. The insult was not just to him as a man, but to him as a CEO, as a partner. If this was how Stellaron's culture treated a potential customer based on their appearance, how would it treat his employees, his people, many of whom looked just like him? The partnership was impossible. It was a house built on a rotten foundation. The decision was made. There would be no merger. There would be no deal. All that was left was the execution. He finally broke the silence, his voice still impossibly quiet, yet it commanded the attention of the entire lobby. "You don't believe the card is real," he stated. It wasn't a question. "And you believe I do not belong here." Clara, emboldened by his lack of an aggressive reaction, crossed her arms. Her arrogance had now reached its peak. "It's a reasonable assumption, wouldn't you say?" she sneered, gesturing vaguely at his attire. "Now, are you going to leave, or do I have to make the call?" The threat was explicit. The disrespect was absolute. Elias Vance simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "No," he said softly. "You won't have to make that call." A faint smile touched his lips, but it was without warmth, a chilling harbinger of what was to come. "But I do." He reached into his other pocket and retrieved his phone. It was a simple device, its screen slightly cracked, the phone of a man who cared about function over form. He swiped it open, his thumb moving with practiced efficiency. Clara watched, a smirk playing on her lips, assuming he was calling a friend to pick him up, admitting defeat. The silent witness, Maya, zoomed in with her phone's camera, capturing the close-up of the calm, determined face of the man she was now certain was Elias Vance. She was no longer just a witness, she was a documentarian, chronicling the precise moment a titan of industry decided to shift the tectonic plates of the corporate world. And he was doing it not from a boardroom, but from a hotel lobby, in response to a single, ugly act of prejudice. The doors to the Corinthian Grand slid open with a soft, expensive hiss, admitting a cool breeze and three figures who moved with a singular, unified purpose. They were the antithesis of Elias Vance's current appearance. A woman in a razor-sharp, dark gray power suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Two men, one in a perfectly tailored navy suit, the other in charcoal, both carrying slim leather briefcases. They were his professional entourage, his chief operating officer, Amelia Harding, his chief financial officer, David Chen, and his general counsel, Marcus Thorne. Their collective presence radiated an aura of immense power and competence. They scanned the lobby, their eyes immediately locking onto their boss, their CEO, standing calmly at the front desk. They did not register surprise at his casual attire, they were used to it. They registered only the situation. The rigid posture of the receptionist. The tension in the air. The quiet stillness of their leader. That was all they needed to see. Amelia Harding, the COO, strode forward, her heels clicking with sharp authority on the marble floor. The sound was a death knell for Clara's arrogance. Clara watched them approach, her smug expression beginning to falter. These people were not lost. They were not confused. They moved as if they owned the very ground they walked on. They were not approaching the desk, they were approaching the man in the hoodie. Amelia came to a stop beside Elias. She did not spare Clara a glance. Her focus was entirely on her boss. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice crisp and clear, a sound that sliced through the lobby's tense silence. "We're all set for the 9 o'clock final signatory meeting with the Stellaron board. Is everything all right? Mr. Vance." The name echoed in the space, amplified by the lobby's acoustics. Clara froze. Her mind raced, scrambling to connect the dots. Vance. Vanguard Innovations. The $5 billion partnership. The man she had just laughed at, threatened, and tried to eject from the hotel. The man whose company was about to become the single largest partner to this hotel's parent company. A wave of nausea washed over her. The blood drained from her face, leaving behind a sickly, pale mask of horror. Her carefully constructed world of superficial judgment crumbled into dust around her. She looked at Elias Vance, really looked at him for the first time, and she no longer saw a man in a hoodie. She saw power. She saw the architect of an empire she couldn't even comprehend. And she saw the face of the man whose career she had just single-handedly destroyed. Her own. She opened her mouth to speak, to apologize, to retract everything, but only a dry, croaking sound came out. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been inverted with the force of a supernova. A moment ago, she held all the power. Now, she had none. She was nothing more than a ghost at a feast, a cautionary tale whose final chapter was being written in real time. The panicked authority figure was about to make his entrance. The general counsel, Marcus Thorne, had already made a quiet call while Amelia was speaking. Seconds later, a frantic, red-faced man in an expensive but now disheveled suit practically sprinted from a set of elevators. This was Mr. Harrison, the hotel's general manager. He had been upstairs, enjoying pre-meeting pleasantries with the very Stellaron executives Elias Vance was supposed to meet. His face, which had been ruddy with confidence and fine wine, was now the color of ash. He skidded to a halt, his eyes wide with terror as he took in the scene. He saw Elias Vance, whose face he knew from the deal prospectus. He saw the formidable trio of Vanguard's top executives. He saw his front desk manager, Clara, looking as if she'd seen a ghost. And he understood, with a sickening, gut-wrenching clarity, that an unimaginable catastrophe had just occurred on his watch. "Mr. Vance." Harrison stammered, his voice trembling as he rushed forward, hand outstretched. "A pleasure to finally meet you in person. I am so sorry, there seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding." Elias Vance did not take the offered hand. He let it hang in the air, a pathetic symbol of a bridge that had already been burned. He turned his cool, placid gaze from Clara to the panicked manager. "There has been no misunderstanding, Mr. Harrison," Elias said, his voice retaining its quiet, lethal calm. "There has been a moment of perfect clarity." He then lifted his simple, cracked phone to his ear. He had not been calling for help. He had been calling the one person who needed to hear his decision directly. "Robert," Elias said into the phone, addressing Robert Stellaron, the CEO of Stellaron Corp., who was waiting for him in a boardroom 2 floors up. "Elias Vance. The meeting is off. The deal is cancelled." A stunned silence fell over the phone line, mirrored by the stunned silence in the lobby. Mr. Harrison looked like he might collapse. Clara let out a small, choked sob. "Elias, what are you talking about?" Robert Stellaron's voice crackled through the phone, a ghost of a $5 billion future. "We're all waiting for you." Elias looked directly at Clara, then at Harrison, ensuring they understood the precise reason for the corporate earthquake he was initiating. "I have always told you, Robert, that culture is the most valuable asset a company has. It's the operating system for every decision, every interaction. It's non-negotiable." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Your culture," he continued, his voice dropping even lower, "is broken. I just experienced it firsthand at your flagship property. We can't build a future on a foundation of disrespect. We're done." He didn't wait for a reply. He simply ended the call. The click was the loudest sound in the world. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, retrieved his Centurion card from the counter, and turned to his team. "Let's go," he said. "We have work to do." Without a backward glance at the wreckage he left behind, the ashen-faced manager, the sobbing receptionist, the shattered remains of a multi-billion-dollar deal, Elias Vance and his team walked toward the entrance and disappeared into the city, leaving the Corinthian Grand to deal with the consequences of its own poison culture. The fallout was not slow. It was instantaneous and brutal, amplified by the merciless speed of the digital age. Maya, the silent witness, watched Elias Vance leave. Her hands were shaking, but her purpose was firm. She knew what she had on her phone was more than just a video of a rude receptionist. It was a story. A powerful, resonant story about dignity, prejudice, and consequence. She edited the 2-minute clip, added a simple text overlay: "Elias Vance, CEO of Vanguard, laughed at by staff at Corinthian Grand Hotel for his appearance. 5 minutes later, he cancels a $5 billion deal with their parent company, Stellaron Corporation." She uploaded it to every social media platform she used, adding a single, potent hashtag, #cultureisnon-negotiable. The video exploded. It was a digital wildfire. Within the first hour, it had 1 million views. The hashtag began to trend globally. News outlets, initially scrambling to confirm the rumor of the cancelled deal, now had the viral proof of why it happened. The story was irresistible: a titan of industry, judged by the color of his skin and the clothes on his back, responding not with rage, but with a quiet, decisive action that vaporized billions of dollars of value. The stock market opened to a bloodbath. Stellaron Corp stock plummeted by 20% in the first hour of trading, wiping out nearly $8 billion from its market capitalization, far more than the value of the deal itself. Financial news channels ran the clip on a loop. Pundits and analysts weren't just talking about a failed merger, they were talking about the catastrophic cost of a broken corporate culture. The Corinthian Grand became ground zero for a global conversation. Its review pages were flooded. Its phone lines were jammed. The brand, once a symbol of luxury and exclusivity, became a byword for arrogance and prejudice overnight. Mr. Harrison fired Clara immediately, a desperate, futile attempt to cauterize the wound. But it was too late. The problem wasn't one employee, it was the system that created her. 2 days later, under immense pressure from the board, Mr. Harrison was also terminated. Robert Stellaron issued a lengthy, public apology, but the words rang hollow. The damage was done. The trust was gone. Elias Vance and Vanguard Innovations remained silent. They issued no press release, no statement. They simply went back to work. Their silence was more powerful than any statement could have been. It said that their actions spoke for themselves. The world had seen the test, and it had seen the results. The story of that day in the lobby became a modern corporate legend, a case study taught in business schools, a motivational video shared millions of times. It was a stark, unassailable lesson written in the language of the modern world, the language of viral videos and stock market crashes. The lesson was simple: character is capital. Respect is a return on investment. And in the 21st century, there is no corner of a company dark enough to hide a poison culture from the light. The quiet man in the hoodie had held up a mirror to the Corinthian grand, and the entire world saw its ugly reflection. The consequences were not a punishment, they were merely the natural result of a deeply flawed cause. This story is about more than a cancelled deal. It's about a fundamental truth that we too often forget in our rush to judge, to categorize, to place people in boxes based on what we see on the surface. We look at a person's clothes, the car they drive, the color of their skin, and we write a story about them in our minds. We decide their worth, their potential, their right to belong in a certain space. We become, in our own small ways, the gatekeeper at the front desk, believing our own shallow assessments are the definitive truth. But what if we are wrong? What if the person in the worn-out hoodie has built empires you can only dream of? What if the quiet woman at the back of the room holds the key to your future? What if the person you dismiss is the one person you should have listened to? Elias Vance's power was not in his bank account or his title. His true power was in his stillness. In his refusal to let another person's prejudice define his reaction. He did not yell. He did not argue. He observed, he processed, and he acted in alignment with his deepest principles. He understood that true strength isn't about winning a small argument in a hotel lobby. It's about having the conviction to walk away from a $5 billion table because it is not a table of honor. He was not teaching a lesson, he was living his values. The consequences that befell Clara and Mr. Harrison were not his doing. They were the architects of their own demise, brought down by the very arrogance they wielded as a weapon. Now, you must ask yourself, how many times have you been the gatekeeper? How many times have you made a snap judgment that closed a door on someone? You might not be canceling a multi-billion-dollar deal, but you might be canceling a potential friendship. You might be dismissing a brilliant idea. You might be extinguishing a spark of potential in an employee, a colleague, or a stranger. Every interaction is a test. Not of the other person, but of you. It is a measure of your own culture, your personal operating system. Are you programmed for prejudice or for potential? For dismissal or for discovery? The world will constantly present you with people who do not fit your expectations. Your challenge is not to force them into your boxes, but to have the wisdom and humility to recognize that their true value might be something your initial judgment cannot see. Do not be so busy looking at the worn sneakers that you miss the titan standing in them. Because culture is non-negotiable, and character is the only currency that truly matters. Your worth, and the worth of your organization, is not defined by the grandest statement you make, but by the smallest courtesy you extend when no one with power is watching. Be the person who sees beyond the surface, for it is in the depths of character that true value lies.